the year 2020, Sars Corona Virus 2 was responsible for the outbreak of COVID-19, the respiratory illness which caused a worldwide pandemic claiming millions of lives in its wake. In Sri Lanka, circumstances manifested into a series of events, most callous and most sinister. For as the virus laid waste to countless lives, the island's Muslim community were faced with a horrifying reality which struck at the very core of their beliefs. Persecuted and abandoned, with nowhere left to turn, this is their side of the story.
Civil society groups have been ramping up pressure on the government to revise the Ministry of
Police in Sri Lanka have warned they will arrest people who don't practice safe distancing. The country has
with cases like that of Fatima Renuza, seeing these pictures are hard for the Muslim community to accept.
He's not going to solve this problem.
The Ministry gave no reason for the decision to reverse the ban.
The health system Sri Lanka is currently in a difficult position as far as the pandemic.
Revise the Ministry of Health's guidelines on the safe disposal of the remains of COVID-19 patients. In this backdrop, United Nations Resident Coordinator
The first time I got to know about this was in about December 2019, when we heard that there was an accidental breakout from a lab where the Americans and the Chinese were experimenting on the virus, but to the public it was the Wuhan wet market that was the source of the virus. To me, it was of concern because that was also the time of the Chinese New Year, when lots of people from abroad, the Chinese people from abroad, were returning home to celebrate the New Year, and within a week they were going to leave China back to their countries of origin. And that to me was a huge threat, because I knew that the virus and the spread of the virus was imminent.
The first patient identified, diagnosed in Sri Lanka was on the 31st of January. That was a Chinese national. So initially, when the Chinese patient was identified, the patient was treated as the hospital at the IDH, you call it IDH, the Infectious Disease Control Hospital. And after about 14 days to 17 days, the patient was discharged and sent back to handed over to the Chinese embassy, where she was, deported back to her country. And on the 17th of March, we identified the first Sri Lankan patient. He was a tour guide, and where he was diagnosed as COVID positive, and along with that, the first wave starts.
I think it was a state of panic, not only in Sri Lanka, all over the world. People did not know what was coming. People were demanding lockdown, and the next day they're demanding open up, so no one knew what was happening. So it's a kind of a panic situation. WHO did not know what was coming. So a lot of uncertainties at that time.
So our initial concerns were to identify what exactly was causing the outbreak. We didn't know for sure at that time, but because we suspected that it may be a SARS-like virus, we already started making diagnostic tests that would cover this group of viruses. So by the 8th of January, we in fact had diagnostic tests ready. In Hong Kong, we had enhanced alert surveillance for any unusual pneumonias. And by the 8th or 9th, the Chinese had released the sequence of the virus. And we knew it then was a SARS-like coronavirus, and our diagnostic tests were fine, they were working. So we were able to share these diagnostic tests with many countries in the world, including Sri Lanka. In fact, Sri Lanka, I think, made its first diagnosis of a SARS-like case using the reagents we shipped them.
The global testing network for the COVID-19 was facilitated by the WHO. So time to time, that was my responsibility as the coordinator, that we have to offer the quality control to the WHO. So our regional laboratory that was monitoring us was the laboratory in Australia. So we have to test the blind samples they send us and report, so that they will test our testing, so that are we in alignment with the global standards or not. And most of the time our testing was like 100% alignment with the global standards.
When we knew from experience that a virus like this can spread very rapidly, SARS-1 in 2003 had been controlled after about 2 or 3 months, but very early studies we did in collaboration with scientists in Guangdong showed that this particular virus, SARS coronavirus 2, was behaving very differently to SARS-1. It was transmitting very early on from the time of onset of symptoms, whereas SARS-1 transmitted much later, and also it was transmitting from people who didn't have symptoms. So we knew that control would be much more difficult than in 2003.
So it went on, the first phase went on till late May, and then there was a period of, a window period, rather you could say a transient period, where there was no cases identified. It was about 2,800 on the first phase, and then started the second phase, where the second phase had about, roughly about 28,000 cases which was going through. And then there was another transient period where the third phase started with an extended third phase. Totally up until now, it's about close to about 698,000 cases had been identified, and 16,000 death has been notified as COVID deaths.
Initially, we saw the state locking down certain areas. We didn't realize it, but then once matters went beyond the control of normal people, then we were all affected. And as a businessman, it really affected each and every person in our community, as well as in our country, as well as in the various trades. So we realized that this is something really serious, which each day was something, we learned something new about it. We didn't know earlier. So new stories were coming out, and we were taking it as it came.
We were working for the Ministry of Health publication unit. One Dr. Charles and Dr. Inoka were first point of contact. We actually started making people aware. In fact, the Ministry of Health organized lotteries board vehicle with the loudspeaker, which we gave personnel from the Colombo District Masjid Federation to go into these remote Colombo Central by roads, into the by road, and make people aware that isolation is necessary and contactless is essential at this point to curtail the spread of the virus.
Community responded very, very well, but naturally a segment of the community, it had nothing to do with the community per se, their living conditions were not very conducive for the ideal social distancing at that time.
If you take Colombo Central, the living conditions were very close to each other, so it will be a very challenging if the virus comes to Sri Lanka, and especially in Colombo, it might be very difficult to control it.
The Muslim community is an urbanized community living in a small congested place. They are socially disadvantaged, and there are a lot of limitation in their living standard. So in a situation like this, when you impose certain conditions for their livelihood, it's difficult to maintain, and the authorities should have the empathy in looking at that situation and take into consideration of implementing the procedures.
In 2020, March 17th, we saw some notification was circulating within the WhatsApp group saying that government has recommended only cremation. This is March 17th onwards. Then immediately at that moment, few members of the community and all Sri Lankan Jamiat Ulama members, we had a small discussion and we wrote a letter to President, Prime Minister, and at that time there was a task force to tackle the COVID-19. It was given to Army Commander, I think, Shavendra Silva. So we wrote a letter to them requesting that there should be an option for burial as well, referring to the WHO's guidelines with regard to the COVID victims' burials. On 27th, we received another notification saying that burial and cremation both are possible. So we were very happy about it, but unfortunately there was a death takes place in Nigambu 30th night, 31st early morning, while the law was permitting burial or cremation without the consent of the family. The deceased were cremated.
We were trying our best to get a burial for that. As the protocol still allowed burial, we tried our best. We had our meetings with our political leaders who were in power at that time. They also supported us, tried their best that whole night.
So the whole night, I think many Muslim community members, they were awake and message were sharing. We were trying as much as possible to delay it till tomorrow morning.
Without nobody's knowledge, in late night, the existing regulations were withdrawn and a new regulations introduced. In that, burial was taken out. Only cremation was introduced as the form of disposal of the body.
First is the nation. First is the law of the land. First is the practice of the land, which had been identified, practiced, endorsed, and it has been put forward as a law. I think I'm not here to contest beliefs and different modalities of engagement of people. To speak on my own, or rather a personal note, I was devastated. Every human life is equally valuable. You are dignified in your society. You are dignified in your belief. You are dignified in your race, religion, caste, creed. But I am also equally dignified at the same.
This was a big blow for us because we never expected, because it was actually something which devastated the whole Muslim community, not only in Sri Lanka, but probably the Muslim community throughout the world.
When the first cremation was done forcefully, that was very alarming, and we never thought it can ever happen to us, but we were shocked, and that's the time the fear among our community really took place.
I am ashamed as a Sri Lankan today. Look at the Muslims. I mean, what are they asking for? They are asking for their last rites. They are asking for their janazas to be buried. These innocent Muslim people, they live all their lives according to the Quran. And right towards the end, their last right, you're taking it away for politics. You all should be ashamed. I am ashamed. And I'm ashamed of all the Muslim politicians who supported this government for the 20th Amendment.
Well, I think the first thing that is also the way our governments make decisions, that there was not any broad-based consultation with the communities concerned, let alone with the scientists. It was one or two scientists in the president's room, and WHO was saying a completely different thing. So to me, first, there was no consultation with the community. Secondly, there was no evidence. There was no science evidence. Anything that I believe policy making must be based on evidence.
Because Islam, there is a law. If the harm is proven, then you can, come up with an alternative law. Because there are certain principles protection of life comes priority. So because of this disease, other people's lives are in threat. That means we need to look into it, but we need to have very, solid evidence for that.
The WHO has said that there was no evidence. So this was the decision of some young doctor. You can't blame her. I mean, she's a young doctor. She had her views. The state must take responsibility for any decision. It was theirs because the other evidence was also produced for them. And thirdly, there was no other country in the whole world, not even Myanmar, which is so anti-Muslim, which was doing this. So I think I was quite horrified by the whole way it was done, the imposition on the community. I thought that was particularly, especially the Catholic community and others who bury, it's not so against their sacred texts. But for the Muslims, it's very, very much against their sacred text. So it was really an attack, an assault on the Muslim community. That's what I felt at that time.
We, from the association, that, you know, we arranged a team, like we were more calling, there was a team called COVID Rapid Force kind of thing, like, you know, so we thought of, okay, this is the time, it's not only for our community, for the whoever requires, that we are going to help them. So within our limit, within our capacity, we did everything possible to make sure that, you know, everybody is in safe. But when the first cremation happens, I mean, especially our old people in our community, they were like completely afraid. They said even they don't want to talk about this. They don't want even to describe, okay, to tell us that, you know, they are sick. But they thought maybe, I still remember I spoke to a few people, one of senior citizens in our community. They said, anyway, someday I'm going to die, but I don't want to die and get burned myself.
As a Muslim, dying is not we don't take it as like we are scared of it or we are worried about it, and we only try to do our best before we die. So this instant, we were all scared to die. I think most of it were the older generation or the people who were sick. They were going through a nightmare.
When a circular comes in abruptly and says all deaths to be cremated, straight away affecting the Muslim community, religious beliefs. Because the Muslim community's religion, Islam, mandates certain rituals to be followed when there is a death in the community.
In general, as Muslims, and what I believe, what I know with all other scriptures, like even Judaism, Christianity and all that, we believe the human being to be the most sacred creation of God. And all the creations, and all creation belongs to the soil. And then Almighty refers in the Quran, says that minha khalaqnakum wa fiha nu'idukum. We created you from the clay, from earth, and you will return unto that. And then it's right through the tradition of all the people who follow the Abrahamic religion that we respect the disease and especially the dead body. It is the first responsibility. We need to give him a respectful bath and then shroud him, and then we need to conduct the prayers and the burial. And if we neglect or if this has been missed, so the entire community member is responsible. We believe that they become sinful by not doing the duty toward the disease properly. And we have a belief within the Muslim community, the soul departs the body and soul experiences every single thing what happens to the body. So actually the death is what we say is a transition from this world to another world. The body is being buried in the soil, but the soul remains in same intact. So we have a belief that when a body is being cremated or being given any type of torture, or if a body goes through a painful process, the soul can experience that. So it's very painful for the Muslim community and the deceased members that on religious grounds there is no room at all to cremate.
So that is completely ignored and created tension. So that tension was uncalled for, and that has created tremendous pressure and concerns in the society.
I don't think anywhere in the world they did PCR on dead bodies. So in Sri Lanka, they did PCR on dead bodies. And once a PCR test is done, there was no way that we could contest that. We had no way of doing a private test. It was all sent to the MRI. And once it comes back, no one could contest it. So people dreaded to fall sick. A lot of people decided, even if they are very sick, not to go to hospital.
Whatever was diagnosed as COVID positive was given, the list was approved, and within that approval, before the burial was approved, it was cremation. After that, it was the choice of the relatives or the choice of the next of the kin. So that was that. But I would not know any of what you are telling, because that was not recorded to me, telling that a non-COVID patient had been cremated rather. That was never recorded to me. Whatever it was recorded was COVID patients to me.
There were lots of things that happened. So when someone in the family, it happens to a person who could be treated, only they will know how much of pain and suffering they underwent, especially during the time of COVID, apart from COVID. Because in many cases, when you go for a PCR, it comes positive.
On the 8th of December 2020, another Muslim victim of COVID-19 was cremated. Tragically, in this particular instance, the victim was an infant child of merely 21 days of age.
நாள் கணக்கு வந்து 21 நாள், மௌத்தா போல 21 நாள். முகமது ஷேக் ஃபாஸ் பேர். ஹாஸ்பிட்டலுக்கு கொண்டு போனேன்டா லேசான அந்த காய்ச்சல் ஒன்று இந்த சுட்டு தான் நான் ஹாஸ்பிட்டலுக்கு கொண்டு போனோம். கொண்டு போகல நல்லா போகிற வரலையும் கணத்துக்கு பார்த்து இதாகி கொண்டு வந்த புள்ள தான். அங்கே ஆஸ்பத்திரி கொண்டு போனதுக்கு போகிறோம். அங்கேக்கு இது பார்த்தாங்க தான் டாக்டர்ஸ் உடனே எமர்ஜென்சியாக உடனே பார்த்து போட்டு அதுக்கு போகிறோம். அவங்க வச்சு போட்டு அதை அவங்கள வச்சு அவர் கணக்கு இருந்தாச்சும் பிள்ளைய கிட்டே கூட அவங்களும் பயந்தான். பிள்ளைக்கு மட்டும்தான் இதான்னு சொன்னான். பிள்ளைக்கு இதுதான் பிள்ளைய செக் பண்ணி நான் டாக்டர்ஸ்கிட்ட கேட்டேன். உடனே எங்கள் அம்மா பாப்பாவுக்கு இல்லாதது பிள்ளைக்கு எப்படி வந்துச்சு. அப்போ வீட்டிலேருந்து எங்கள் பிள்ளைக்கு எப்படி வந்துடுறதாலும் கேட்டது கேள்வி அவங்களுக்கு பதில் இல்லை. ஐசியில் தான் போடணும், உங்களுக்கு வந்து பார்க்கறதுக்கே மேலானு தான் சொன்னாங்க.
பால் கொடுக்குற பிள்ளைய அப்படி அட்மிட் பண்ணிவிட்டு நீங்கள் வீட்டுக்கு போங்கன்னு எங்களை விரட்டினான். அப்போ உமாவோண்டு சரி பிள்ளைக்கு டெலிக்கோ இருந்தாங்க. அந்த பிள்ளைக்கு பாலும் இல்லை ஒன்றும் இல்லை, தனியாக தான் அந்த பிள்ளை யாருக்கோ பாரம் கொடுத்துட்டு வந்த மாதிரி நாங்கள் இந்த
5 மணிக்கெல்லாம் கோலன்னு வந்து இப்படி இறந்துருச்சு புள்ள மவுத்துன்னு சொல்லி. அப்போ ஆஸ்பத்திரி வர சொல்லி நான் ஆஸ்பத்திரி போனேன். ஆஸ்பத்திரி போன நேரம் அப்போ அந்த ஐசியூ வார்டுக்கிட்ட தான் போனேன். ஐசியூ வார்டுக்கு போன நேரம் புள்ளைய பார்க்கலான்னா லெட்டர் ஒன்று தந்த ஃபோம் ஒன்று தந்தாங்க. அந்த ஃபோமில் சைனை வைங்கன்னு சொல்லி நான் சொன்ன சைனை வைக்கல, என்னை புள்ளைய தருவீங்களா அப்படி கேட்டேன். அப்போ அவன் சொன்னான் சைனை வச்சுட்டு புள்ளைய பார்க்கறதுக்கேல இந்த கொரோனா இதுக்கு தான் போட்டு உங்களோட புள்ளைய பார்க்கலா தரைய மாட்டோம், நீங்கள் சைனை மட்டும் வச்சுட்டு போங்கன்ட்டு. அப்போ நான் சொன்னேன் தராத பிள்ளைக்கு எனக்கு சைன் வைக்கிறதுக்கு ஏலா, சைன் வைக்க வேண்டிய இது இல்லை எனக்கு, பிள்ளைய தாரேன்னா நான் சைன் வச்சு எடுத்துகிட்டு போகிறேன்ட்டு. அப்போ டாக்டர் சொன்னால் வந்து இந்த உங்களுக்கு அப்படி இதாக இருந்தாக்கா நீங்கள் வெளியால் கொரோனா இது செக் பண்ணிக்கு தாக்குங்கன்ட்டு. நான் அதை பற்றி பேசுறது மறுபடியும் ஆஸ்பத்திரி கோல் போனேன். அப்படி சைன் வைக்கலாம் நாங்கள் சொல்லத்தக்கன்னு எங்களுக்கு தெரியாமல் புள்ளையா முன் வழியாக மறு வழியாக எடுத்து போனாங்க பொருளை கணத்தைக்கு. இப்போ அந்த இடத்துக்கு நான் போகல, நான் கணத்தை வாசலோடே நின்றுட்டேன். பொருளை கணத்தை வாசலோடு நான் நின்றுட்டேன். வாசலில் டிவியில் தான் உட்காந்து முடிந்தேன். நான் உள்ளால் போகல. ஏன்னா அந்த டைமில் எனக்கு அங்கே அந்த டைமில் அதை பார்க்க வேண்டிய இது இல்லை, அதை பார்க்கறதுக்கு இது உண்டான இது இல்லை. அதனால் நான் உள்ளால் போகல.
அதை கொடுத்துருந்தா சார் நாங்கள் இன்றைக்கு அந்த துவா சார் இன்னும் அந்த பிள்ளைல கபடி சார் போகிறதுக்கு இல்லாது
கஷ்டமான பகுதிந்தா பேபி இறந்தது கஷ்டமான பகுதியாக இருந்தாலும் அது எரிக்கப்பட்டது தான் ஆகவே தாவின் ஒரு இது பேபியை கொண்டு போய் எரித்தது தான் எனக்கு ஆகவே கஷ்டமான ஒரு பகுதி உண்டாதுங்களா.
මුස්ලිම් මරණ සම්බන්ධව වැඩ කරනකොට පොඩ්ඩක් අපහසුතාවලට අපි සෑහෙන්නපත් වුණා. ඒ කියන්නේ එක ඉල්ලීම් අපිට එනවා, ඒවා ඉතින් අතාරින්න බැරි ඒවා. ඒ කියන්නේ දැන් මුස්ලිම් කෙනෙක්ගේ ආදාහනයක් කරනකොට සම්ප්‍රදායික වශයෙන් ආගමික වශයෙන් කටයුතු කරන්න වෙනවයි. එතකොට දැන් ඒවා සිදු කරන්න කිසිම අවස්ථාවක් ලැබුණේ නැහැ ඇත්තම කියනවා නම්. ඉතින් හස්බන්ගේ බොඩි එක වයිෆ්ට බලන්නවත් ළමයින්ට බලන්නවත් හම්බෙන්නේ නැහැ. අම්මගේ බොඩි එක ළමයින්ට බලන්නවත් ඒ ළමයිගේ තාත්තා බලන්න හම්බෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඉතින් ඇත්තම කියනවා නම් අර ඒක වචන වලින් කියන්න බෑ අපිට ඒ ෆීලිංගස් දැන් උනත් මතක් වෙනකොටත් හරිම දුකයි අපිට ඇත්තම කියනවා නම්. ඒ කියන්නේ පවුලේ ළඟම ඥාතියගේ බොඩි එක එයාට මුකුත් කරගන්න බෑ, එන්නවත් බෑ, බලන්නවත් බෑ. ඒ කියන්නේ ආගමික කටයුතු කරන්න පල්ලියට ගෙනියන්නවත් බෑ. ඉතින් ඒ තරම් අසීරුතාවයන්ටපත් වුණා.
Another day, another cremation. The victim this time is a wife and mother from Kandy.
அவர் பேர் வந்து ஜெனீலா உம்மா. அவங்க மௌத்தா போனாங்க 50 வயசு. அவங்க வந்து சோமிடாம் ஒன்று இருக்காங்க. நல்லா திலகத்தனமாக இருந்தாங்க. விடிய சுபகில் எங்களோட மூத்த மகளோட பேரை சொல்லி கூப்பிட்டாங்க. அம்மா கொஞ்சம் தலைவலியாகி கொஞ்சம் பாருங்க அப்படின்ட்டு. இப்போ டக்குன்ட்டு எங்களோட மூத்த மகள் போய் பிடிக்கிற நேரம் என் தலைவலி கொஞ்சம் அப்படின்னா அப்போது ரோவு போயிட்டு அப்போ ஹாஸ்பிட்டலுக்கு போனோம். ஹாஸ்பிட்டல் போனால் இந்த டாக்டர்னோட சொன்னாங்க எப்படின்னா எங்களோட உயிர் கொஞ்சம் இருக்குது, நீங்கள் எதுக்கும் கொண்டு போங்க கடுகஸ்தோட ஹாஸ்பிட்டலுக்குன்ட்டு. அங்கே ஹாஸ்பிட்டலுக்கு அட்மிட் செக்ஷனுக்கு கொண்டு போகிற நேரம் அவங்களோட உயிர் போயிட்டு. இனி அவங்க என்ன செஞ்சாங்க, கொரோனாட்டு போய் தள்ளி விட்டாங்க.
நாங்கள் எவ்வளவும் ஃபைட் பண்ணி பார்த்தோம் ஜனாசா எடுக்கிறதுக்கு. ஜனாசாவாக வந்து எங்கள்கிட்ட சொன்னால் தாரன்னு தான் சொன்னாங்க. பெஸ்ட்டுக்கு சொன்னாங்க நெகட்டிவ்ன்ட்டு இல்லை பாசிட்டிவ்ன்ட்டும் இல்லை நடுத்தரமாய்க்குது, நாங்கள் ஜனாசாவை தருவோம்னு சொல்கிற மாதிரி சொன்னாங்க. 2 வீக்ஸ் ஆகியும் ஜனாசாவை தரவே இல்லை. அங்கே நாங்கள் எவ்வளோ ஃபைட் பண்ணி எவ்வளோ கேட்டு பார்த்தோம். போலீஸ் மூலமாக எங்களுக்கு தெரிஞ்ச ஒவ்வொருத்தர் மூலமாக இவ்வளவும் ஃபைட் பண்ணி பார்த்தோம். ஜனாசாவை கேட்டு பார்த்தோம், தார மாதிரியே இல்லை. திடீர்னுட்டு கொரோனா ஆயிக்குதுன்ட்டு தான் இவங்க இந்த ரிப்போர்ட்டை எங்களுக்கு செஞ்சாங்க. ரிப்போர்ட்டை காட்டவும் இல்லை. ரிப்போர்ட்டை நான் கேட்டு கூட ரிப்போர்ட்டை காட்டலை. ரிப்போர்ட்டை அப்படி தர இயலான்னு சொன்னாங்க. அதுக்கப்புறம் நான் எங்களோட உம்மோட ஜனாசா இழுத்து காட்டினாங்க மோச்சேர்லேருந்து. அதை இழுத்து பார்த்தப்போ நான் சொன்னேன், இது எங்களோட தாய் தானே, என் உமா தானே நான் சொன்னேன். நான் அடையாளத்தை காட்டினேன். அடையாளத்தை காட்டினேன்னு உடனே ஜனாசாவை எடுத்து 4-5 ஜனாசா எடுத்தாங்க. அது இந்த சிங்கள பொடி இந்த போலீஸ் பொடிகளையும் ஈந்திக்கும் நிறைய நாட்களாக இன்றைக்கி ஈந்தாங்க. அதில் எல்லாம் ஜனாசாவிலையும் போட்டுண்டு போலீஸ் பாதுகாப்போடு கொண்டு வந்தாங்க. இங்கே அழைக்கிற இந்த கெரக்கொப்புக்கு இந்த தாங்க எடுத்துன்னு வந்தாங்க கட்டுக்கு இந்த மகையாவை இழைக்கிற. அப்போ அங்கே கொண்டு வந்து ஜனாசாவை வச்சாங்க. வச்சுட்டு எங்களுக்கு சொன்னாங்க, ஜனாசாவை நீங்கள் நாங்கள் இப்போ எங்களோட ஆகமப்படி நாங்கள் தொலைவிக்கணும் தானே, ஜனாசாவை தொலைவிக்கிறது எங்களுக்கு 10 நிமிஷம் தான் தாரேன்னு சொன்னாங்க. அப்போ எங்களுக்கு அன்றைக்கி ஒழுவெடுத்துக்க கூட ஒரு இடம் உண்டிக்கல ஜனாசா இன்னைக்கு கொண்டு வந்து வச்சிக்கிற இடத்துல. அப்போ நாங்கள் ஒழுவெடுக்க வந்தோம். இந்த மகையாவா காட்டுப்பள்ளிக்கு தான் ஜனாசா இந்த தொலைவிக்கிறதுக்கு ஒழுவெடுக்க ஓடிட்டு வந்தோம். அப்போ ஓடிட்டு வந்த டைமும் எங்களுக்கு இந்த ஒழு எடுத்து டைம் போதாது. டைம் ஒழுங்கான டைம் தரல. நாங்கள் அல்லா கிட்ட எங்களுக்கு துவா கேட்க கூட எங்களுக்கு டைம் தரல. அதுக்குள்ளே சொன்னாங்க, நீங்கள் 10 மினிட்ஸ் 10 நிமிஷத்துக்கு எங்களோட வேலையை முடிக்கணும், அவசரமாக கூட வேலையில் முடிக்க சொன்னாங்க. எங்களுக்கு அவ்வளோ சுருக்கம் எங்களோட மார்க்கத்தில் படி எங்களுக்கு ஜனாசா எங்களுக்கு தொழில் அவ்வளோ கஷ்டம். அப்போ சொன்னாங்க, நாங்கள் அவ்வளோ சுருக்கம் எங்களுக்கு டைம் இல்லை, நீங்கள் அவசரமாக உங்களோட வேலையை முடிங்க, எங்களுக்கு மிச்ச நேரம் டைம் தரையலாம், உங்களோட ஆகமாக நீங்கள் இப்போ எங்களுக்கு ஒன்றும் செய்யலாம், நீங்கள் அதுக்குரிய வேலையை அவசரமாக செய்யுங்கன்ட்டு. அப்போ நாங்கள் எவ்வளோ எடுத்த பாதி எவ்வளோ எடுக்காத பாதி ஓடின்னு வந்தோம். கால கழுவும் கிடைக்கல. நீ ஒழு சேர்ந்துச்சா இல்லையா அல்லாக்கு தான் வெளிச்சேன். அப்போ இந்த பேசிமாம் தான் தொலைச்சாங்க. அப்போ இந்த கட்டுக்கலை பள்ளியில் இந்த மகையா பள்ளியில் பேசிமாம் தான் ஜனாசாவை தொலைச்சாங்க. தொலைச்சதுக்கு அப்புறம் எங்களுக்கு எனக்கு இந்த உடனே சொன்னாங்க, நீங்கள் மிச்ச நேரம் பார்த்து நிற்க வேணும், உடனே போங்கன்ட்டு எங்களை அனுப்பிட்டாங்க போலீஸால். எனக்கு இந்த
up till now, even continuously community members, the family members where the bodies were, cremated, they still come for counseling. They keep asking what's happening. On religious perspective, will we forgiven? What happened to our father or mother or brother or sister? So we keep saying, this happened forcefully, so they are forgiven. we say they are shaheed. Shaheed means they are martyrs. So no, they have highest reward by Almighty. So this is how we keep counseling. I know some of the family members who still having those trauma.
For any of these issues, when you're in the reconciliation phase and you're dealing with issues like reparations, it's usually good to have psychosocial counseling for the victims. This is often done, even for the JVP insurrection of 1988-99, all those people who have gone through bad times, the northern issues, etc. So I think some kind of psychosocial counseling would be very useful.
There was a lot of displeasure and a lot of frustration in society, Muslim community in particular. So they started disbelieving the system. There's no way for them to come out with their agony, because the Muslim community in this country is not putting much burden on the system. They're finding their own way. They have their own job creation. They are not asking the government for any other support. They are a law-abiding group of people. For some reason, you marginalize them, and that is not fair.
Government has nothing to do with it, in short. It is the expert committee that decides finally. So government is the cabinet of ministers, the president, prime minister and the cabinet of ministers, and nothing to do with it. It is just that we are relating and we are acting in terms of the advice given by the expert committee.
It was like this. I think a lot of people see it outside and have different views about it. To be very honest on the basis, I think where the WHO gave the guideline telling that it can be buried or cremated according to the situation of the land. So the land doesn't mean what is the soil. It's the land, the state decisions. So it was kept open. So initially India was also cremating most of it, and then they evolved into a situation where it was allowed to bury. It was going through phases like that, and there were certain countries, because we took this precedence from the Chinese and the Wuhan. So there the practice was to cremate. So everybody was trying to follow that practice without knowing the geographical scenario of your own. So when this expert opinion came, so there were certain experts consulted in our country as well. So ultimately the expert opinion was given to monitor, review with scientific evidence with the evolving time, but initially to decide on cremation.
Unfortunately, don't forget the fact at that time it was fashionable to be anti-Muslim. Even courts refused to intervene. That's a sad part as a lawyer.
On Tuesday, the Supreme Court dismissed 11 petitions challenging the forced cremations. A joint statement by 20 civil society organizations on Thursday rejected the ruling, saying in a statement, "The fate the victims of forced cremation of COVID-19 or COVID-19 suspected dead had in the highest court in Sri Lanka has been shattered. Victims and communities are now left without a recourse in Sri Lanka for the continued injustice they suffer."
As soon as they banned the burial, we went to court. Mr. Sumandiran, Mr. Virankure, who were not Muslims, also took the initiative. We went to the Supreme Court. We said it's violative of Article 12. We went and made submission saying 192 countries have allowed it. But the state vehemently objected. They brought in documents, they tried to substantiate the position, stating that there could be a greater catastrophe if burial was permitted. And also in India, the courts held differently. And I say this was arbitrary. I went and said it was arbitrary. And it was done to teach the Muslim community a lesson. And we tainted with malice. So, court, you can't blame court because the government puts material, gave a fierce psychosis to court, said that if you allow this, the virus could spread. The judge is also human. they also were worried. But what I have to say is the government misled court by filing documentation to say that that if you bury through water, this virus could spread.
Within your question, you came out to say enforced cremation. So, would you rather call it enforced revenue license renewal? Would you rather call it enforced tax payment? No, when it has become the law of the land, it is the law. So by citizens or as citizens, we are bound to abide.
I mean, our Supreme Court, to be fair, has been good in certain things. Recently, it's been good on that case on economic mismanagement. It's been good on certain civil and political rights cases. But when it comes to religious issues, it's always hands-off. They never get involved. They do support the Buddhist clergy and Buddhist claims. But I do not think that in the history of Sri Lanka they have ever really held up a claim of minority religion. And I think minority religions don't normally go to them. In India, they have in the past held, with the Supreme Court, has held some cases, including the COVID cases. But as a general rule, the Sri Lankan court on ethnic and religious issues differs to the legislature.
Unfortunately, media did not help. Media trying to, rather than finding solution, they sometimes wanted to vilify a community or so using the situation. Some of the media owners and all were very close to me, my friends. So behind the scene, we made a lot of effort to tell them this is not the approach. You need to win them over and do it as a national cause. But sometimes what happens is it's about the views and competition among each other. So unfortunately, during that particular period of time, it was just coming after the Easter Sunday attack. Things were fresh in the mind. There was an anti-Muslim sentiment among the general public, whether we like it or not. So some thought best way is to capitalize on that.
We came out with various alternative proposals of how the government could support us by not cremating. For example, we gave them, can we use reinforced concrete coffins, right, and seal it, and we want to seal the whole place with concrete. We gave them so many proposals. It was all privately, and whatever privately we gave it proper facts and figures with engineering and things like that, but still they rejected us.
As the best efforts of civil leaders yielded little success, it was left to the Muslim medical practitioners to plead their case. Their hopes rested entirely on the merits of scientific evidence and logic.
I represented a team of mainly Muslims who met with the authorities of the National Health Service of Sri Lanka, trying to make the case for safety of burial of COVID-19 victims, not only for Muslims, but also for all of those people who practice burial as a form of disposal of their dead bodies.
We had 2 meetings. I remember on the 13th of April 2020 and on the 15th of April 2020 with the Director General of Health Services.
The state team that we presented our discussions with were comprised of the Director General of Health Services, several specialists in clinical medicine as well as microbiology, forensic pathologists. These are people who finally gave you the green light to dispose of a body. And also, if I remember, there was a hydrogeologist there who argued the case for cremation versus burial by the fact that human dead bodies, if buried, would decompose, and that would contribute to the spread of the virus, albeit dead, through water. Sri Lanka being a country which had a high water table. So that was their main thrust of presentation against the case of burial.
The question of transmission from dead bodies, yes, the virus can persist infectious for a period of time. So people have to be careful, take standard precautions when they handle people who have died recently from COVID-19. But once a body is buried, viruses do not replicate unless the cells of the body are living. So once the cells die, the virus also starts to die. Unlike other organisms like bacteria, which can actually survive and multiply in the environment, viruses cannot multiply in the environment, and they will start to die from the time of death of the person.
Here's the reason. The COVID-19 virus is an RNA virus. An RNA virus cannot possibly live outside by its own self. It has to engage with an animal host, in this case the human host. It chose the respiratory tract, the epithelium or the lining of the nasal passages as a mode of entry. And once it engaged with the human cell, it borrowed a part of the human DNA to replicate and multiply and therefore spread as the human being coughed and sneezed. So this was the modus operandi, if you like, of the RNA virus.
So we did present to them all the guidelines from every conceivable part of the world. At that time, I think there were 200 odd countries in the world, and 182 of them were following burial with no problems. No groundwater contamination, no spread through water. So we presented this evidence to them, and in fact we also commissioned some studies about the soil and hydrology of Sri Lanka, and we presented those studies also to them. And also we presented the latest developing evidence during this period where cremation was enforced in Sri Lanka, to ask them to at least reconsider.
So at the time the geologist spoke about the spread of, or the possibility of spread of the virus, I did interrupt and asked her for the evidence for the reason that she was making those comments. And I also at the same time presented the evidence that the Ebola virus, which is far more vigorous and virulent virus that occurred and created storm in Africa, those people who died of the Ebola virus were buried. The WHO's statements were not averse to burial.
Professor Methika Vitanage is not a geologist, and she had been working on groundwater years, but she didn't, I see that she didn't understood the behavior of groundwater in the soil. But her opinion I contradict, because there were many research have been done on this subject, the virus, the survival of virus and biological materials, the living materials in groundwater for a long time. But these references or this literature says there is no chance for any viral material, the particles, to live in water for more than few days. So, and also especially when it is over 23 degrees Celsius, the temperature is, there is no chance at all for survival of viruses in groundwater.
In this country, people with viral infections, HIV included, get buried. And that did not make sense to bury people with an RNA virus that was destroyed no sooner the human body stopped living, compared with burial of HIV viruses, which had the same mode of spread in a water table. That is as high as in Sri Lanka. So I argued for the case that this did not make scientific sense. To me, it was a blatant violation of the principles of science.
Viruses are different to chemicals like nitrogen and phosphorus, which of course can survive for years and years. I mean, it can go from a site of burial into the groundwater and can be spread. But infectious viruses start to die, as I explained. So they will not survive for long enough to get into groundwater tables. And also, there are different types of viruses. So viruses like SARS coronavirus 2 do have a very fragile outer envelope. So that means they die much faster. There are other types of viruses like polio, norovirus, which cause diarrhea. They can survive for much longer. So you really have to understand the nature of the virus that you're dealing with in order to make some recommendations regarding the risks of transmission, whether it be from burial or from other sources.
The facts for burial were that an RNA virus was not able to live outside the human host, and with the death of the human host, the RNA virus became ineffective a few hours after death.
Now, we know that there are many patients with COVID who are not diagnosed. They may not be detected at all. Some patients don't have many symptoms. And even if they get diagnosed for the first few days, they may be at home or whatever. So the feces that they're excreting in many parts of Sri Lanka go into soakage pits. Unlike in Colombo, where you have centralized sewerage systems, many parts of Sri Lanka, the sewage goes into soakage pits. So if there was really a serious threat of infection coming from human secretions in terms of transmission, that would be a much bigger risk of transmission because all these soakage pits ultimately also are connected with the groundwater tables. So for all these reasons, the risk from burial per se was not regarded as great from a purely scientific point of view.
The virus is infecting through 3 routes. One is an infected person putting the droplet directly to the next one. Inhalation of that droplet coming from the infected individual. The other route is the infection going to the air. That is why we are not allowed to stay in air-conditioned, closed environments because of that reason. So a person can contaminate the air. By inhaling that air, you get the virus. The third way of getting the virus is the virus can be deposited by an infected person on surfaces. By touching the surface and putting your hand to orifices like the nostril or the mouth or the eye, that is how the virus goes.
It is for these reasons that the WHO, in its subsequent recommendations, basically recommended that first and foremost, you need to handle the dead person's body carefully, and close contact and kissing and things like that should be discouraged. But and cremation is preferable. But if individual family, for whatever reason, wishes to bury the body, that is permissible. That the public health risk from burials would be negligible. So that was the WHO recommendation. That was the recommendation in Hong Kong and many parts of the world as well.
It may be possible for the fomite contamination when you wash the body. But bodies are not washed. They are sealed and given in a coffin. So how can the virus go? You can't justify. So therefore, how can a person say the virus is going to be there in water or wastewater forever? It won't. So therefore, as a virologist, I can defend the virus cannot go from a dead body to a live person or live individuals unless the aerosols, that is why treating a person with a full-blown infection is dangerous. Because you put the respirator, you manage so that you create aerosols. So that is how doctors got, nurses got, healthcare workers died, because active infection in a person, when you treat them, then you create aerosols. So inhaling that will be the risk. And there is no way the virus can come from a dead body to infect live people. So how can you tell that these 3 routes are possible from a dead body?
You see, I have been in the business of medical education since 1970. And I've taught generations of doctors. And what was going through my mind was, is this the science that we taught these guys? And is it the type of practice that we encourage them to follow? Because they were going against everything that was scientific from the very outset.
They said they will reconsider the decision in 6 months, but it never happened. They never reconsidered the decision, they never called us for our opinion. So though we kept presenting updated evidence to the scientific community, if I may say, should have been updating themselves on their own and coming to us and saying this is the evidence which have changed, but they didn't do that.
There are two experts in virology. COVID-19 is a virus, and one is Professor Jennifer Pereira, who taught virology as a subject in the field of microbiology, and she is the one who started the courses in the Colombo Medical Faculty for the first time in this country. Professor Tissavedana was the head of the virology unit at the Medical Research Institute before he took to politics after retirement. And if these two had been there in those committees, then it would have been a balanced committee. And they would have been able to give their opinion as to the behavior of COVID-19. Most of the people in the committee probably didn't know even what a virus was. Because I can even today go and challenge some of them, and before a scientific community, ask them to give us a definition of virus, and you probably find them stuttering. And without knowing this, how can they come and talk about the behavior of a virus after death in the body that it is parasitizing?
At one period, we got a circular that we all worked out, and the Director General of Health gave us a letter addressed to the Minister of Justice at that time. Supply 5 refrigerated containers to keep the COVID bodies, very clearly it is mentioned in that letter, keep the COVID bodies until burial is arranged. Immediately our friends came into the act immediately, and we found 5 refrigerated containers, 40-foot containers, and we got a transport, and we transported it to Colombo, to the morgue, and in the night we unloaded it. And the next day morning we had all the racks ready, and the power was given, and the reefer container was working, and bodies started getting piled up here. This was at the peak of the COVID period. But however, a couple of days later, we were told that there was another circular issued saying that we never asked you to bring this to store COVID bodied, but we have asked you to bring it to store unclaimed bodies. So it was just a shocking thing where government gives circulars and they go back on their own circulars due to an agitation maybe by some of the small particular groups who are very much against burials of COVID bodies, against the wishes of the WHO and similar organizations in Sri Lanka.
I have grown up my entire life in Sri Lanka, and I am in fact educated in Sinhala and extremely conversant in Sinhala. So you could consider me as one of the assimilated into the, if you have a majority or minority, I don't like to look at it that way, but into the Sri Lankan identity. But that meeting on that day shook my belief in who Sri Lankans are, purely on a scientific basis. Because at the end of that meeting, we were shocked to hear that the state will not reconsider its decision on national security grounds. In fact, one of the participants at that meeting, I would like to name him at this point, he was Dr. Channa Pereira, who was the JMO. Later he became in charge of the cremation process of Colombo East Hospital, where the infectious disease hospital is. He so far as went on to say that if, and I'm quoting, if the Muslims are given this, the right of burial of COVID dead, they will take the bodies and make it a biological weapon.
Well, honestly, I can't understand that statement. I mean, it makes no sense to me because, as I explained, there is no risk of, no public health risk of burying the body of somebody who has died of COVID-19, provided it is done in the appropriate manner. in the appropriate type of place. And as I mentioned, many people with COVID-19 are excreting the virus in their stool, which goes out into the environment through soakage pits in many parts of the world, or many parts of Sri Lanka. So the concept of weaponizing, I don't even understand the statement.
He was a racist. You can add this. He was an utter racist, I could say that. That was Channa Pereira. I don't know how a professional could become a racist. I was unthinkable. In my life, I had appeared for all sorts of parties. I don't care who they come from, which religion and all those things. I take it as a professional. I do my best. When the whole community was against Honorable Gotabaya Rajapaksa, I thought, for me, he's a client. And I will stand for him. May the whole world goes against him, I'll stand for him and I'll fight for him, and I fought for him. And so that's the kind of standard we expect from a professional. But this man was in a different world of his own. And that lady, Nithika Vithanage, I don't know, they were professors or whoever it is, the way they treated us, there no respect, there no empathy.
This was an extremely offensive statement coming from a medical officer to his fellow medical personnel in that room. In fact, Dr. Pereira had gone on to give an interview in the BBC, which she reiterated this claim that it will be a biological weapon.
The BBC interview, he told he has concerns about weaponizing it. Who is he? If at all that kind of a comment should come, would have been from the SIS or the intelligence, I can understand. He been just asked a simple question. On a medical science, will this create a situation, contribute towards the spread of the virus? Nothing beyond that. But he was going beyond that, so that shows that he was prejudiced.
And the meeting on the 15th was even worse, because by that time, the authorities had decided not to consider any more submissions by anybody. But at the same time, the evidence in the international scene was completely changing. And they were not considering. So we asked them to share us, okay, we do understand that international evidence will differ from local evidence. So we asked them, okay, if Sri Lankan water is so special so that it can nurture and sustain the SARS-CoV-2 virus, please commission a study. We will also participate. If the geography is so unique in Sri Lanka, which I believe it is for various other tourist reasons and so on, but not where the virus is concerned. But the virus is a droplet infection. It has nothing to do with the geology or the hydrology of the country. So we did try to emphasize these points to them, but then I think the decision, I believe now that the decision was never scientific.
They were going against the science, and they were arguing on the basis of politics. And so that the science said that burial can be allowed in patients who are COVID-19 positive, but what they said was that it was politically inadvisable to pursue that line of sort of preferential treatment for one community. And we also argued that it was not one community, it was a preference of anyone. I don't think that committee was properly constituted at all.
We want to know how was this committee formed? Who were its members? What are the credentials of the officials who sat in those committees? What were their credentials? What is the evidence they reviewed? We are still awaiting answers. This is now 2.5 years later. I don't think we are posing a national security risk. This is purely on a scientific basis because we also would like to learn. Perhaps the government had some unique information which was privileged to them, which justified it. Then they should share it with us. So we could, spread it around the world and, they also could learn from Sri Lanka's experience.
I was a Sri Lankan surgeon working well settled in the United States of America, undertaking frontline research at the University of Minnesota. I decided to come back to serve my country at the time that the war was ravaging and destroying the life of young human youth. For somebody like me, I saw myself purely as Sri Lankan, purely as somebody who needs to give back what I got from my country in terms of medical education, free of charge, albeit. And my hopes and visions for a future Sri Lanka, successful Sri Lanka, were temporarily shattered at that point in time. I haven't given up hope, but that was how I felt at that time.
Minister Pavitra Vanniyarachi wanted to see me. I was actually starting the testing here on a Saturday. Then I rushed to the meeting 6 a.m. from here to be there in the Ministry of Health by 9. Then there was a committee appointed by the Ministry of Health, I was told, chaired by Dr. Channa Pereira. And so in that meeting, I was asked to tell about what I feel about cremation. And like, is the virus going to be a threat if you bury? So I talked, and the virologists that were in the audience all supported my argument, and eventually they said, okay, they're going to take the stage 2 of the meeting in a different room. Then I thought, okay, this is over. They called me for a thing, I've defended and I'm going. So then the secretary of the Ministry of Health, the consultant radiologist who is from the forces, he called, you also go to that meeting, the part 2 of the meeting. So then I went. In that whole group of people, there was not even a single virologist, not even a microbiologist in that group of people. All of them were forensic pathologists, and there was a geologist. There was a geologist. I thought, like, how can you make a committee without a virologist? And there are plenty of virologists at that time working in different hospitals. And 2 of them came with me, and they also said almost what I said. And they couldn't cope, and they just left because they had work to do. I sat through the meeting and decided that this meeting is not going to make any decision. So then I left the meeting, and then we were sent the minutes of that meeting. And I found some of the things that we discussed and some of the things that were in the minutes were different. And I thought, what is this? Like, I was part of that meeting, and then I immediately wrote to that committee, you know, like, from where these things are coming. So that person said, no, like, we had another meeting after you left. Then what stayed over was what that committee decided, not what we said or what we discussed or what, you know, came from that whole meeting was what they thought. I recalled what I studied at the school, like, Sri Lanka's constitution says Sri Lanka is a multicultural, multi-religious country, and everybody as a Sri Lankan citizen is allowed to practice what they believe. That is our constitution, right? So then there is a special law enforcement, and that is going beyond even the global standards, that cremation is the option. Other disposal methods are not allowed. So I thought, we are wrong. We are wrong, we are unethical. We are not respecting the citizens of the country to practice what they believed. What was, they thought dear for them was not allowed. Therefore, I thought that was not acceptable. And the country would have seriously considered the WHO standards. The country would have actually considered expert opinion on these matters. Even Professor Malik Piris, who was advising the WHO for protocols and, different other things. So why the Sri Lankan government couldn't get his opinion on these matters? If the global standards and global institutes can get his advice, why can't we get his advice? He's always available for Sri Lanka.
No, I was not specifically asked about recommendations regarding burials or cremations or that particular issue.
Madam, your ministry has appointed a committee on the 24th of December. It's an expert committee on virologists a report has come out where it says that you can bury. And in fact, that committee report gives details of how the burials must take place, how funerals must take place when handling the dead bodies. All of that has come out. So which committee report are you referring to? Because in fact, that committee that your ministry appointed on the 24th of December refers to the earlier committee and says that those recommendations from the earlier committee were outdated because those recommendations are given prematurely, whereas now there is much more substantial information. So may I ask you, on what basis you give this reply, and also can you please share with us the report that you rely on?
අපේ රාජ්‍ය අමාත්‍ය සුදර්ශනී ප්‍රනාන්දු පුල්ලේ මැතිනියව හමු වෙලා තිබුණා වෛරස් විශේෂඥයින් පිරිසක්. ඒ අයගේ තීරණයක් මා වෙත ලබා දුන්නා. ඒ තීරණය මේ විශේෂඥ අප විසින් පත් කරලා තියෙන මේ ප්‍රධාන කොමිටුවට ඒ තීරණය අපි යොමු කරලා තියෙනවා. ප්‍රධාන කොමිටුවෙන් තාම අපිට වෙනම තීන්දුවක් ආවේ නැහැ.
So you agree that this committee was appointed by your ministry. This committee consists of virologists who are the relevant experts who can pronounce on this matter, and that it was a subcommittee to the main committee that you refer to, and that you have referred this subcommittee's report to the main committee, but the main committee chooses to ignore the experts. Is that your ministry's response, madam?
විශේෂඥ කමිටුව විසින් මෙය අධ්‍යයනය කිරීමෙන් පස්සේ ඔවුන්ගේ තීරණය අප වෙත ලබා දුන්නම අපි ඒක පිළිගන්නවා.
There was a lot of agitation by all the other Islamic countries asking that this does not happen or it should not be done. But one particular thing was, during that time, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, made a visit to Sri Lanka. So there was a lot of like talks here saying that he was going to officially ask that the cremation to be stopped. But he never asked it. According to what I understand and what I heard, he never made any request from the Sri Lankan government to stop cremation or to change the policy. But the Sri Lankan government, as he was the representative for the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Countries, the Sri Lankan government had asked him, can you please recommend about something to do with the UN, the human rights thing, on behalf, because the OIC was not going to support us. At that moment, the Prime Minister of Pakistan had told us, I can ask this favor for a friendly neighborly country, I can ask this, but if I ask them, they are going to ask me, how can we support them when they are discriminating the Muslim population in Sri Lanka by cremating them? So then I think the government decided that let's quickly change this policy, and they started allowing for burial. However, still the people who were against burial and wanted the cremation, they made sure that the place for burial, they recommended a place 20 kilometers away from Mannar, a small island, I think around 20, a couple of kilometers away, where the bodies had to be taken by boat. So we were going to take the body to Mannar, Talemanar, and from there by boat to this small island. However, there also there was protest, so they didn't allow, so they decided against it. And then they decided to another island closer to Jaffna, a barren island, where that was going to be the second place recommended to bury Muslim bodies. Then it all changed, and the government had to do something very fast. They wanted to somehow start burial. Then we had already selected these places all over, which is most possible, and one of the best places that they found where all the requirements for burial is perfect was ODDAMAVADI.
ரெண்டாயிரத்தி 20 கடைசி பகுதியில் அரசாங்கத்தினால்
கோவிட்டால் இறக்கின்ற உடலகங்களை அடக்கம் செய்வதற்கான அனுமதி வழங்கப்பட்டு பொருத்தமான இடத்தை இனங்காணும்படி அரசாங்கம் அறிவித்திருந்தது.
அதன் காரணமாக ஜம்மியத்துல் உலமாவுக்கு ஜனாதிபதி அவர்கள் பொறுப்பு கொடுத்திருந்தார்கள். அவர்களும் பல இடங்களில் அந்த இடங்களை தேடிக்கொண்டிருந்தார்கள். சில இடங்கள், அதாவது மக்களே வாழாத இடங்கள் கூட சில இடங்கள் இலங்கையில் அடையாளப்படுத்தப்பட்ட போதும் கூட இனவாதத்தை, முஸ்லீம்களை, அதாவது அவர்கள் எந்த அளவுக்கு அவர்களுடைய உரிமைகளை பறிக்கப்பட வேண்டும், அவர்கள் ஒடுக்கப்பட்டவர்களாக எப்படி வாழணும் என்றதில் முன்னிருந்த காரணமாக அப்படி இனவாதத்தை கருத்தில் கொண்டு அந்த இடங்களை கூட இனவாத கண்ணோட்டத்தோடு பார்த்து நாங்கள் அந்த இடங்களை அனுமதிக்க மாட்டோம் என்று, அதாவது மக்களுக்கு தெளிவுபடுத்த வேண்டிய மதகுருமார்கள் கூட ஆர்ப்பாட்டத்தில் இறங்கி அனுமதிப்பதை தடை செஞ்சு கொண்டிருந்தார்.
அந்த அடிப்படையிலே சமூக மட்டத்தினால் பல இடங்கள் தேடப்பட்டு கொண்டு எந்த இடமும் பெற்றுக்கொள்ளாத முடியாத ஒரு சூழ்நிலை ஏற்பட்டு கொண்டிருந்த நிலையிலே தான் எங்களுடைய கோர்லை பெற்று மேற்கு ஓட்டமாவடி பிரதேச சபை எங்களுடைய பிரதேசத்திலே இந்த தேசிய பிரச்சினைக்கான ஒரு தீர்வு காண வேண்டும், அதற்கான ஒரு சந்தர்ப்பத்தை நாங்கள் வழங்க வேண்டும் என்ற ஒரு அடிப்படையில் எங்களுடைய பிரதேச சபையின் கௌரவ உறுப்பினர்கள் கூடி நாங்கள் ஒரு தீர்மானத்தை எடுத்ததுடன் எங்களுடைய பிரதேசத்தில் உள்ள பள்ளிவாசல்கள், சமூக மட்ட அமைப்புகள் என்ற அனைத்து நிறுவனங்களுடைய ஒத்துழைப்பும் இதற்கு பெறப்பட்டது. எனவே எல்லோருடைய ஒத்துழைப்புடன் நாங்கள் எங்களுடைய பிரதேச சபைக்கு எல்லைக்குட்பட்ட மஜ்மா நகர் சூடுபத்தின சேனையிலே இதற்கான ஒரு இடத்தை நாங்கள் அடையாளப்படுத்தினோம்.
I am the divisional coordinating committee chairman for ODDAMAVADI Pradesh Sabha, DCC chairman, and I said I will undertake. Whatever comes, any operation comes, I will undertake. Then I spoke to Mr. Karunagaran, GA, then GA at about 6:30, fourth night, that we need your support. Tomorrow the team will come for inspection. Ensure that they get the positive response. So, coordinated with all the officials there, police, army, government, local authority, divisional secretary, hospitals, etc. Everybody was in favor. I must thank everyone. And nobody knew that we were going to bury. Not a single soul knew that we are going to bury. We were going to bury on the 5th. We only told them there will be team coming for inspection and you ensure that is done. We only knew Mr. Hamdan, Afzal Mareka, Basil Rajapaksa Minister, Savindra Silva Army, and some people, some officials, very few people. So 4:30 again I went back to the hospital. We prayed Janaza prayer that we called Janaza for Mayyit. We prayed there, took the Mayyit, and they, placed it in the army truck. The Mayyit was moving by 5:55. We left IDH hospital. We never had permission at that time. Never had the permission. Because the meeting was supposed to be held at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. Next day morning, because everybody has to, and very quick, it was only 6:30, I gave the instruction to government agent, the GA. While I was moving Polgahaval on the convoy, I called divisional the local authority secretary, ODDAMAVADI, Shehabdi. I told him, you are the only people other than us will know that I am coming with the Mayyit.
தேசிய ரீதியிலே பல்வேறு இடங்கள் அடையாளப்படுத்தப்பட்டது. குறிப்பாக மன்னார் மாவட்டத்திலே ஒரு பிரதேசம், அதே போன்று மட்டக்களப்பிலே மாந்தீவு பிரதேசம் போன்ற இடங்கள் இதில் இணைவாக அடையாளப்படுத்தப்பட்டன. இருந்தாலும் அந்த பிரதேசங்களில் உடலங்களை அடக்கம் செய்கின்ற அந்த நிகழ்வு ஒரு சமூகம் சார்ந்ததாக அல்லது சமயம் சார்ந்ததாக பார்க்கப்பட்டு அது எதிர்ப்பு தெரிவிக்கப்பட்டது. அந்த ஒரு கட்டத்திலே இந்த விடயத்தை எங்களுடைய இந்த பிரதேசத்தில் உள்ள இந்த காணியிலே அடக்கம் செய்கின்ற தீர்மானம் வந்தபோது நாங்கள் இங்கு சமூகம் சார்ந்ததாக அதனை பார்க்கவில்லை. அதாவது உயிரோடு வாழும்போது பல்லின சமூகம் வாழுகின்ற இந்த நாட்டிலே இனங்களுக்கிடையில் ஒரு முரண்பாடு காணப்பட்டாலும் மரணத்தின் பின்னரான ஒரு அடக்க நிலையில் கூட அவர்களை நாங்கள் தள்ளி வைக்காது அவர்களை சேர்த்து அரவணைத்து அடக்கம் செய்வோம் என்கின்ற ஒரு நிலைப்பாட்டுக்கு இந்த பிரதேச நிறுவனங்கள் சமூகம் சார்ந்த சமயம் சார்ந்த பெரியவர்களினுடைய அந்த நல்லுள்ள தீர்மானம் வெட்டப்பட்டது.
In the meantime, we were waiting for the great signal to leave from Polonnaruwa. So they had to come, inspect the place and go and sit, get their report done, and the report has to come back to Health Ministry, Ministry of Defence, etc. Then they have to give the permission. By the time the report came from Batikalo, already Mayat started moving. And we went in, nobody knew. By the time we reached about 3 or 2:30, something like that, and we buried the first janaza. That was this Khalil Hajia and the Sanatuma, that lady.
Also, I must mention that the ODDAMAVADI people and the ODDAMAVADI, the Pradeshi Sabha group, they organized for cutting the trenches for the bodies. All that was funded by this group of philanthropists. Right? Government was not involved in finding anything. They just gave us the place. But we organized this team on our own and digging off the grave, taking the body over there, all those things. It was very hard soil. It was not soft soil there. So we had to give machines. Even one organization from Kandy, they provided a JCB machine to dig the graves. So that was the speed, because we didn't care. We only just wanted our bodies to be buried as fast as possible at this location. And thereafter we tried our best to try to get another location towards closer to the western province, but there was no chance.
ODDAMAVADI is, I think, only one place suggested by some organization to consider as a good place for burial. But there we could have find many other places from wherever the requirement arises, because the only the criteria, important criteria, are the dry soil, the clay soil, and no groundwater table. You could have found many places for fulfilling those conditions in anywhere in the country.
With burial now allowed, the Muslim community faced the daunting task of transporting bodies from all parts of the island to ODDAMAVADI.
So what happened was, once the cremation stopped and burials were permissible, we actually came together as a group.
It was a 24-hour operation where whenever there was a death in any hospital or a house, or when it is identified COVID, the body used to go to the mortuary, and we had our members who inform us by WhatsApp.
MOH, Ministry of Health என்ற ஒரு வாட்ஸ்அப் குரூப் ஒன்று வச்சிருந்தோம். மினிஸ்ட்ரியோட நாங்கள் எல்லா பகுதிகளுக்கும் முழு இலங்கைக்கும் நாங்கள் கோஆர்டினேட்டர்ஸ் போட்டிருந்தோம்.
මට ඇති වෙලා තිබ්බ කාර්යභාරය තමයි යටිනුවර කියන බල ප්‍රදේශය ඇතුළත කවුරු හරි කොවිඩ් නිසා මිය ගියොත් එයාලා සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඒ පවුලත් එක්ක අපි සම්බන්ධ වෙලා ඒ කටයුතු ඒකට අවශ්‍ය ලිපි ලේඛන වර්ග තියෙනවා, PHI මහතුරුත් එක්ක සම්බන්ධ වෙන්න වෙනවා, ඒ ෆැමිලි එකේ අනිත් කට්ටිය ක්වොරන්ටයින් කරන්න සිද්ධ වෙනවා. ඒ සියල්ල අපි බලලා ඒ අයට සහයෝගය දක්වන වැඩේ තමයි අපි කරේ.
டிஸ்ட்ரிக்ட் வாரியாக, ப்ரொவின்சியல் வாரியாக எல்லா ஊர்கள்லையும் கோஆர்டினேட்டர்ஸ் போட்டு அவங்களுக்கு வாட்ஸ்அப் குரூப் 2 கிரியேட் பண்ணியிருந்தோம். ஒன்று கோவிட் ஜனாசா 1, மற்றது கோவிட் ஜனாசா 2 உண்டு. இது ரெண்டுலேயும் ஒரு பகுதி வந்து கொழும்புலேருந்து ஹம்பந்தோட்டை, ரத்னபுரம் அந்த ஏரியா வரக்காப்பளை வரைக்கும், அதுக்கு இங்கேயால் குருநாகல, ஊவா, சென்ட்ரல் ப்ராவின்ஸ், அப்படி ஜஃப்னா, முல்லித், வவுனியா இந்த பகுதியில் மன்னார் எல்லாருக்கும் கோவிட் ஜனாசா 2ன்ற வாட்ஸ்அப் குரூப். இதில் வந்து எங்களோட கோஆர்டினேட்டர்ஸ் வந்து டெய்லி அப்டேட் பண்ணுவாங்க. இந்த ஹாஸ்பிட்டலில் எக்ஸாம்பிள் நாவல்பிஸ்டி ஹாஸ்பிட்டலில் ஒரு கோவிட் பாடி இருக்குது, தெல்தெனியில் ஒரு பாடி இருக்குது, மாத்தலில் ஒரு பாடி இருக்குன்னு சொல்லி அது அப்டேட் ஆகும் எவ்ரிடே. அப்போ அதை நாங்கள் ஈவினிங் பிஃபோர் 6 மணிக்கு முதல்ல மினிஸ்ட்ரி ஆஃப் ஹெல்த்துக்கு இந்த கோவிட்
குரூப்லேருந்து எடுத்து எம்ஓஹெச் குரூப்புக்கு போடுவோம். எம்ஓஹெச் குரூப்பில் போட்டதுக்கு பிறகு அவங்க மினிஸ்டர் டாக்டர் ஹம்தானி மூலமாக அவங்க அதை ஆர்மி ஹெட் குவார்ட்டர்ஸுக்கு அனுப்புவாங்க. ஹெட் குவார்ட்டர்ஸ்லேருந்து அந்தந்த பகுதியில் இருக்கக்கூடிய கேம்ப் மூலமாக மற்ற போலீஸ் ஸ்டேஷன்ஸ் அவங்க என்னை கண்டாக்ட் பண்ணுவாங்க. கண்டாக்ட் பண்ணி எந்த பகுதியில் எந்த இடத்துல பாடி இப்போ கேண்டிலன்னு சொன்னாக்கா நாங்கள் நாவலப்பிட்டி, கம்பலை, பேரதினிய, கேண்டி இந்த ஏரியாவுக்கு ஒரு கேம்ப் மூலமாக அவங்க எஸ்கார்ட் தருவாங்க. எஸ்கார்ட் மூலமாக அந்த பாடியை நாங்கள் கேண்டியை கொண்டு வருவோம். இங்கேருந்து கேண்டிலேருந்து எடுத்துக்கிட்டு நாங்கள் குருநாகலுக்கு மார்னிங் 9 o'clock 9:30 முந்தி கொண்டு போய்ட்டு ஹேண்ட் ஓவர் பண்ணணும். அதுதான் எங்களோட டியூட்டியாக இருந்துச்சு.
Even some of our members provided lorries, additional lorries, because when these bodies left certain areas, it was mostly from the western province. We made sure that if somebody dies little late in the morning, if we can catch up these lorries halfway, we used to take the body there and somehow see that it is transported to ODDAMAVADI. So we were able to use our team from Kandy to coordinate all these things. So bodies from Badulla, from Ratnapura, from Matara, from Hambantota, even entire central province, even from Jaffna. Jaffna of course went to ODDAMAVADI direct, but from Puttalam, Kurunegala, all these were coordinated, well organized, and we didn't want to leave anybody back. And when the bodies increased, we provided additional transport trucks, and we made sure that these bodies reach ODDAMAVADI on time for burial in the night.
One such individual tasked with the safe and expeditious facilitation of COVID bodies was SHM Nizar.
මට බාර දුන්න ඇවිල්ලා මෝච්චරිය ඇවිල්ලා මරණ අරගෙන ඉවරලා ඒක ඇවිල්ලා කවුරුත් සහභාගී වුණේ නැහැ. මම මේ මරණය අරගෙන අයිතිකාරයන්ට පෙන්නලා ඒක පෙට්ටියේ දාලා බලලා ඔක්කොම කරලා ඒගොල්ලන්ට සෑමදේම ඒගොල්ලන්ට පෙන්නලා ඒගොල්ලන්ට ආගම කටයුතු කරලා ඊට පස්සේ මගේ වෑන් එක ඇම්බියුලන්ස් ඩ්‍රයිවර් එක්ක ඒක ඇවිල්ලා වෑන් එක පටවගෙන එක්ක කුරුණෑගල නැත්නම් ඕටමාවඩි ගිහිල්ලා බාර දෙන්න ඕනේ.
One thing is our team, we didn't only do it for our own community. We accepted anybody. If anybody wanted burials to be buried, we took over those bodies of any community. And also, this was a time when coffins was in big demand. So we got into like industry to make coffins immediately, and we supplied it free. So when anybody wanted a coffin, within hours our team used to go and give the coffin.
පුත්තලම ඉඳලා බොඩිස් එක ගෙනලා තිබ්බා. ඒ බොඩිස් එක ඉදිමුණා. ඉදිමුණා කියන්නේ අර පෙට්ටිය දාලා ඉදිමුලා එහෙම පෙට්ටිය කැඩුනා. කැඩුණාන් පස්සේ ඒක ඇතුලින් ඉඳලා මැස්සෝ ආරම උඩක් එන්න පටන් ගත්තා. ඒත හමුදායෙන් කිව්වා මේ රිජෙක්ට් කරා. මේක අපිට කරන්න බෑ. මේක ගිහිල්ලා ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ පුත්තලම ගෙනියලා ආයි නැවත රිප්ලේස් කරලා ගෙන්න කියලා. ඒතර ගෙනියන්න ක්‍රමයක්වත් නැහැ. ඊට පස්සේ මෙතන ඔක්කොම කල්පනා කරලා මොනවද කරන්න කියලා අහනකොට මම කිව්වා රයිට් කම්මන්න මම කරලා දෙන්න.
People were scared. There was a lot of fear. So people thought that anybody getting even closer to a COVID body, that was the fear psychosis done by various people. So no one used to even go close to a coffin.
මම කිව්වා ටේප් එක ගේන්න ලනු ගේන්න මම කරලා දෙන්නම්. ඊට පස්සේ මගේ ඇම්බියුලන්ස් එකේ ඩ්‍රයිවර් ඉස්සත් කියලා එක්කිනා එයාවත් ළඟ තියාගෙන ලනු ගෙනලා පෙට්ටිය උඩටම නැග්ගා. පෙට්ටිය උඩ නැගලා පෙට්ටිය රුංගා කමාරු මේ කකුල මේ පෙට්ටිය ඇතුළට මම ඉඳගෙන කකුල මේ තද කරගෙන පෙට්ටිය ෆුල් ටයිට් කරගෙන ලනුවෙන් බැන්දා. බැඳලා ඉවර ෆුල් ටේප් එක වටේට ගහලා ඊට පස්සේ හමුදාව ඇවිල්ලා බැලුවේ නැහැ. ඒගොල්ලන් කිව්වා ෆුල් ෂේප් නම් ගිල ලොරියට ට්‍රක් එකකට පටවන්න කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ ඒකෙම ඒ වෑන් එකෙම දාගෙන එතකොට ට්‍රක් එකටයි වෑන් එකටම ලුක මෙච්චර උසක් තියෙනවා. උස්සන්නත් ඕනේ. එතකොට දෙන්න ඉන්නේ එක වෙන කවුරුත් ඉන්නේ නැහැ. ඊට පස්සේ ට්‍රක් එක අරගෙන එතන ඒක ෆුල් සීල් කරලා දුරේ ඉඳලා බැලුවා ඕකේ මෙහෙම කිව්වා. ඕකේ කිව්වා ඊට පස්සේ අපි දෙන්නක් ආවෙලා උස්සලා එතකොට ඒකේ තියෙන අර ඇතුලින් වැක්කේන මගේ මේම ෂර්ට් එකේ මේ වැක්කෙලා මේ පැත්තෙන් ඇවිල්ලා එහෙම ඊට පස්සේ ડોක්ටර්ස්ලා ඕ ගාලා කෑ ගැව්වා. මං කිව්වා සර් ප්‍රශ්නයක් නෑ ඔය නිකන් ඉන්න. ඊට පස්සේ ටක් ගාලා පටවල වුණාට ස්පිරිතාලෙන් ඇවිල්ලා මට අර සෙන්ලයිස් ඔක්කොම ගාලා ඔක්කොම ෂර්ට් එක ගලවන්න කියලා ඔක්කොම ගැවුවා බේට්ටි ගහලා. ඊට පස්සේ තව එකක් ඒ වගේ තමයි අපි නුවර ඉඳලා ගෙනිච්ච එක. ඒක පටවන්න ලෑස්ති වුණේ පෙට්ටි කැඩුනා. එහෙම වටනකොට මට මොනවත් කරගන්න මම එහෙම බදාගත්තා මේක. මම බදාගෙන බෙඩට මොනවත් කරන්න බදාගෙන මම ඇම්බියුලන්ස් ඩ්‍රයිවර්ට කිව්වා ඔයක පැත්තෙන් අල්ලන්න කියලා අල්ලගෙන ආයෙ ඇම්බියුලන්ස් එකට ගත්තා. අරගෙන ඉවර වෙලා ඒක සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ආයි නැවත පැක් කරලා ඒකත් අණුවෙන් බැඳලා ටේප් කරලා ඊට පස්සේ මමයි ඇම්බියුලන්ස් ඩ්‍රයිවරු හුස්සලා ඇම්බියුලන්ස් දාලා අපේ සිද්ධික මහත්මයා කියන හැටියට එක්ක කුරුණෑගල එහෙම නැත්නම් ඕටමාවඩි ඉල්ල බාර දෙන්න.
யாருமே அந்த ஜனாசாக்களை கோவிட்னால் அடக்கப்படுகின்ற ஜனாசாக்களை யாருமே கையாள முடியாத நிலையில் அங்கு கொண்டு வந்த நேரத்திலே சுகாதார பகுதியினிடத்தில் கேட்கப்பட்டது இதற்கான ஏற்பாடு எதுவும் இருக்கின்றதா என்று அந்த இடத்திலே யாருமே முன்வரவில்லை. உடனடியாக எங்களுடைய சபை செயலாளர் அவர்கள் எங்களை விழித்த பொழுது நாங்கள் இந்த இடத்தில் இருக்கக்கூடிய அத்தனை சகோதரர்களும் நாங்கள் இதை சுமந்து அடக்குவதற்கு தயாராக இருக்கின்றோம் என்று எல்லோரும் எந்த விதமான ஒரு சங்கடம் இல்லாமல் அந்த பணியில் ஈடுபடுவதற்கு எங்கள் எல்லோருக்கும் வாய்ப்பு கிடைத்தது. அல்லாஹ்வுடைய கிருபையினால் எங்கள் அத்தனை பேரையும் 2, 3, 4 தடவைகள் பிசிஆர் எடுத்து செக் பண்ணார்கள். அல்லாஹ்வுடைய உதவியினால் எங்களுக்கு யாருக்குமே எந்த கோவிட்டும் இல்லாத ஒரு நிலை காணப்பட்டது. அது அல்லாஹ்வுடைய அருளாக நாங்கள் நினைத்து பார்க்கின்றோம். ஏனென்றால் சாதாரணமாக நடக்கக்கூடியவர்களை செக் பண்ணுற பொழுது அவர்களுக்கு கோவிட் பாசிட்டிவாக இருக்கின்றது. ஆனால் எங்களை பொறுத்த மட்டிலே அத்தனை பேரையும் ஒன்றுக்கு பல தடவைகள் செக் பண்ணார்கள். யாருக்கும் அந்த நிலை இருக்கவில்லை. அல்லாஹ் தஆலா எங்களுக்கு அதை அருளாக தந்தான்.
From the state there were many officials and many professionals who helped us during this period. In particular, Dr. Hamdani was one officer who helped us coordinate all the burials and to coordinate between the army and us. Also, there were many JMOs, there were many Grama Sevakas, there were many mortuary officials, there were many government servants who supported us. As much as there were some who were very much discriminating us, there were a lot. The majority was supporting us. At this moment, I would like to say that even when all these bodies were taken to ODDAMAVADI, the army and the police helped us a lot. They did a lot of service by providing the escorts and things like that. And the army commander, and who always, anytime we wanted, we were given concessions or make things faster. We have to appreciate what they have done for us during this grave time that we went through.
Those people worked against probably the wishes of their family. They spent many days and nights, if you like weeks, out of their homes, working hard in ODDAMAVADI, making it happen. The logistics is beyond thinkable, and when you put all of this together, these are unsung heroes.
We have a practice of visiting the grave of our loved ones. So going to ODDAMAVADI is costly because most of the 3,000 odd families, maybe majority of them are very poor families. They could not even have the funds to travel to ODDAMAVADI to see the body being buried. So some of them flight by bus, which takes 2 days for them to stay overnight. So they have a lot of financial constraints also for majority of the families to go to ODDAMAVADI. So the government should have thought in a different angle to make it easy on the people.
ODDAMAVADI was the some relief, but at least we know that okay, at least we can give the finer ritual. I mean, as per our Islamic faith. But I mean, I know one of my uncle has been buried there. We are not able to visit. Maybe once a year we have done a visit there, but it's not easy, It's one of the most difficult. I mean, I can tell you when I'm talking to you, I get goosebumps, That's the situation that we went through. I just want to make sure that no community, no humanity should face this problem. I wish it's like a bad dream for us, but in reality, of course, it's a reality. But this should not happen to anybody.
කවදා හරි දවසක ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ ඥාතීන්ට ඇවිල්ලා බලන්න ඕනේනේ අයිඩෙන්ටිෆයි කරගන්න ඕනේ මේක මගේ කෙනාගේ සොහන කියලා. එයාට ගිහිල්ලා බලන්න පුළුවන්. එතන ගිහිල්ලා ඥාඥා කරලා ඉන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක හොඳ ඇත්තටම කියනවා නම් හොඳ ටීම් වර්ක් එකක ඒ කියන්නේ හරිම අපූර්වට හැම දෙයක්ම ක්‍රමානුකූලව ඔක්කොම භූමිදානය කරලා තියෙනවා. එකම දුක තමයි ඒ ඥාතීන්ට හිතපු වෙලාවට ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ සොහන් කැබ් වලට යන්න බැරි වෙච්ච එක ගැන.
At that time, we were wondering whether we were part of this country because we were completely ostracized, we were completely marginalized purely on this basis. So, whatever the social outcomes, scientific accountability must progress. And I think locally, internationally, regardless of ethnicity and community, all straight thinking people should support the process of the demand for accountability as to how exclusive cremation for COVID became so in Sri Lanka during that period.
If I were to look back as to what happened during ODDAMAVADI and the events that led to it and what our entire community went through, I would say ODDAMAVADI never again.
To be sensitive to the rights of other communities, especially if they are not violating your rights in any way, to be tolerant and to see richness in their practices, you know. So to accept that diversity is first step. Because if you're in that frame of mind, then you don't want to do these kinds of things. Half the problem is the style. The refusal to consult, the refusal to work, refusal to negotiate, refusal to compromise, and to work with people, and especially on issues of ethnicity, race, and religion. That's the only way forward.
You can't divide people. Dividing people is not good for the country and the country's prosperity. We are right throughout marginalized communities, and ultimately, we have got into serious political and economic disaster. So that this country can't go on like this, we have to recognize people. We have to celebrate diversity and the differences of the community. That is our wealth. It's not a burden. In my opinion, discrimination policy denotes that message of others. But ultimately, Muslim community collectively responded, no. All are equal at ODDAMAVADI.
O soul that are at rest, return to your Lord, well pleased, well pleasing. So enter among my servants and enter into my garden. Al-Quran 89:27-30.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.
Ya Daim, Ya Daim, Ya Daim, Ya Allah, Ya Daim, Ya Daim, Ya Daim, Ya Allah.